We often mistake aging for maturity. We look at someone in their 30s or 40s and assume they've figured life out. Bills are paid, jobs are held, smiles are maintained, but beneath the surface something strange lingers, a feeling of being emotionally stuck, like adolescence never truly ended. Why does this happen? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And perhaps nowhere is this more true than in how we grow or fail to grow into adulthood. For many women, the journey to emotional maturity is interrupted, not by laziness or lack of intelligence, but by something deeper, an internalized mythology of what a woman is supposed to be. Let's unpack this illusion of maturity, and why some women remain emotionally young no matter how many birthdays pass. When we speak about immaturity, we usually think of irresponsibility, missing deadlines, poor decisions, reckless love lives. But what if immaturity isn't a behavior? What if it's a condition? In childhood, girls are often praised for being nice, quiet, helpful. These traits, while socially acceptable, are not necessarily signs of growth. They are signs of compliance. And when compliance becomes a strategy for survival, it replaces genuine self-discovery. From a young age, many girls internalize an identity built around pleasing others, avoiding conflict, and being good. But this blueprint doesn't leave room for the most vital part of maturity, authenticity. So instead of developing their own values, boundaries, and sense of self, they grow into adults who still seek external permission to exist. They may look mature, but inside they're still asking, am I allowed to be who I really am? In Jungian psychology, there's a figure known as the puella eterna, the eternal girl. She's charming, spontaneous, emotionally expressive, but she resists responsibility. She avoids stillness. She fears the weight of choice. She lives not in reality, but in the potential of things. She's always figuring it out, always starting over, always almost there. Our culture doesn't just tolerate this archetype, it celebrates it. In film, she's the manic pixie dream girl. In real life, she's the woman whose identity is built on being adored, forever youthful, forever unburdened. But beneath this playfulness is a shadow, the fear of being alone with oneself. The eternal girl doesn't want to grow up because growing up means facing the uncomfortable truth. Your life is your responsibility. No one is coming to rescue you, and that kind of freedom, it terrifies her. You can be 25 or 55 and still be trapped in emotional childhood. It looks like constantly needing validation, avoiding conflict out of fear of being disliked, building a life around romantic partners instead of personal values, struggling to make hard decisions without outside input. Jung warned that when the ego avoids the task of individuation, becoming a whole and integrated self, it begins to fragment. Life becomes performative. You show people what they want to see, but the real you, she remains undeveloped, hidden beneath personas. You might chase careers, relationships, spiritual fads, but they all feel like costumes, because they are. Without facing your inner wounds, especially those inherited from childhood, you build a life on borrowed identities. You play roles instead of living truths. And eventually, that catches up to you. For many women, immaturity isn't chosen, it's learned protection. A woman who grew up in an environment where expression was punished, or where caretakers were unstable, learns to adapt in order to survive. She becomes what others need her to be, and in the process, she loses access to her own instincts. This is not weakness, it's intelligence, but it's also a trap. The girl who wasn't allowed to say no becomes the woman who can't set boundaries. The girl who had to parent her own parents becomes the woman who resents responsibility. So she clings to partners who feel stronger, or she avoids leadership roles, or she sabotages stability because she associates it with confinement. True maturity requires healing, not just growing older, but going inward. Dependency is seductive. It tells you you don't have to figure it out. Someone else will take care of it. Just focus on being loved. But this comfort has a cost, your sovereignty. When a woman avoids maturity, she unknowingly trades her power for protection. She becomes passive in her own story. Life happens to her, love finds her, time passes her by, and when things go wrong, there's always someone to blame. My parents didn't teach me, my partner didn't support me, my boss didn't recognize me. While all of these might hold truth, none of them set you free. Freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to save you. It begins when you say, I am willing to be responsible for myself, even if it scares me. So what does maturity look like in a woman? Not perfection, not stoicism, not a loss of joy or softness. It looks like owning your choices, even the bad ones, learning to sit with discomfort instead of fleeing from it, saying no without guilt, letting go of fantasies and building something real, facing your shadow, your envy, your shame, your need to control, and loving yourself anyway. Real maturity is not about becoming hard, it's about becoming whole. You integrate your light and dark, your strength and vulnerability. You stop outsourcing your self-worth. You become your own authority. There's no shame in being stuck. We all have areas where we resist growth, but ask yourself, where am I still waiting to be rescued? Where do I fear responsibility because it threatens my comfort? Who would I be if I stopped performing and started becoming? The truth is, life will initiate you through heartbreak, loss, solitude, failure. But you don't have to wait for crisis to grow. You can choose to evolve now, to stop playing small, to let go of the eternal girl and step into the integrated woman. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because on the other side of emotional immaturity isn't just adulthood, it's freedom. Jung believed that each of us has a task to become ourselves, not who society wants us to be, not who our parents needed us to be, but who we really are, beneath the masks, beyond the roles. So the question isn't, why haven't I grown up yet? The real question is, am I willing to meet the woman I was always meant to become? And that journey, that's where real maturity begins. Relationships don't cause immaturity, they expose it. The woman who hasn't done the inner work will often seek relationships not out of love, but out of emotional outsourcing. She chooses people not because they align with her values, but because they make her feel safe, seen, or validated, temporarily. She may mistake intensity for intimacy. She may confuse conflict avoidance for peace. She may stay silent when things hurt her, afraid that speaking up will lead to rejection. But these are signs not of love, but of unprocessed wounding. Jung warned that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But if one person remains stagnant, clinging to the fantasy of being saved or completed, then the relationship becomes lopsided. It becomes a parent-child dynamic. One gives, one takes, one leads, the other follows. True maturity in relationships begins with self-confrontation. Not how can I be loved, but am I showing up as someone capable of love, grounded, whole, and honest? Without that, even the most passionate connection becomes another form of hiding. Some women develop a mask of competence. They're hyper-organized, polished, articulate. From the outside, it looks like they've mastered adulthood. But beneath that exterior lies anxiety, perfectionism, and a deep fear of failure. This is performative maturity, a carefully constructed illusion. It might look like taking care of everyone else while secretly feeling resentful, overworking to avoid feelings of inadequacy, acting independent, while quietly yearning for emotional rescue. In this mode, she plays the role of the strong woman, the one who never needs help, never falls apart. But this strength is brittle, because it's not rooted in self-knowledge, it's rooted in fear. The fear of appearing weak, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being seen as ordinary. This too is a form of emotional immaturity, one that hides not behind youth, but behind competence. The mature woman doesn't need to perform strength, because she knows that real strength includes the ability to be soft, to ask for help, to rest, to say I don't know, without shame. And that kind of quiet power, it's invisible to the world, but unmistakable to the self. If Socrates taught us anything, it's that wisdom begins with one terrifying admission: I know that I know nothing. Perhaps the same is true of maturity. To grow, we must first admit where we are still naive. To become whole, we must first acknowledge the parts we've denied, avoided, or numbed. This is not a journey of becoming better. It's a journey of becoming real. So ask yourself, not from guilt, not from shame, but from truth: what parts of myself have I locked away in fear? Where am I still a girl pretending to be a woman? What illusions am I ready to shatter, so that I can finally stand on solid ground? Growing up is not a betrayal of your past self, it's the liberation of your true self. And it begins not when someone else tells you you're ready, but when you decide, I'm ready to meet life as I am, imperfect, evolving, and finally awake. There's a quiet kind of immaturity that hides beneath love songs, romantic daydreams, and Hollywood endings. It's the belief that someone else will heal us. Many women and men grow up internalizing the idea that emotional fulfillment will come through another person, that if they're patient enough, kind enough, beautiful enough, someone will swoop in and make their pain disappear. But this belief isn't romantic, it's regressive. It places the burden of selfhood on someone else's shoulders, and while it may feel sweet at first, intoxicating even, it eventually leads to disillusionment, because no partner, no matter how loving, can carry the responsibility for your peace. This is why so many people bounce from one relationship to another, always hoping the next one will finally feel right. But emotional maturity means understanding no one can save you from the work. A healthy relationship is not a solution, it's a mirror. It shows you where you're whole and where you're still fractured. It challenges your patterns, it exposes your reflexes, it reveals your resistance. You don't complete each other, you complicate each other, and through that friction you grow. There's an illusion that haunts almost every woman on the path of growth, the idea that one day she will arrive, she will finally be confident, finally be wise, finally have it all figured out. But this idea, seductive as it may be, is a trap. Because growth isn't linear, it's recursive. It spirals back on itself. Just when you think you've healed something, life will hand you a new layer to examine. You'll think you've mastered patience until you fall in love again. You'll think you've conquered fear until your dreams expand beyond your comfort zone. You'll think you're done growing until life humbles you again and again. True maturity is not a destination, it's a posture, a willingness to stay open, to keep learning, to laugh at yourself without shame, to be okay with not being okay. The woman who understands this no longer chases perfection, she practices presence. She doesn't wait for life to crown her grown, she shows up again and again, and earns her wisdom through living. There is a kind of woman who emerges from the fire of her own becoming, not because she was forced to, not because life demanded it, but because one day she looked at her reflection and said, I want to know who I truly am, without the noise, without the masks, without the borrowed scripts. She walks through solitude like a temple. She trades validation for integrity. She gives up the game of pretending and chooses the sacredness of honesty. And in doing so, she begins to embody a different kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to shout, the kind that doesn't tremble in silence, the kind that is rooted, centered, whole. You've likely met this woman. She speaks slowly, she listens deeply, she doesn't need you to agree, but you'll find yourself leaning in when she speaks. She is not immune to fear, but she doesn't bow to it. She is not free from pain, but she doesn't make others pay for it. She is not perfect, but she's real. And in this world of performance and projection, realness is rebellion. If you are on the path to becoming her, know this: you are not late, you are not broken, you are not behind, you are not too much. You are exactly where you need to be. So breathe, unclench your jaw, soften your heart. This journey is not a test, it is a remembering of who you were before the world told you who to be. And now, finally, You are coming home to yourself. There's a kind of violence we rarely speak about, the violence we do to ourselves in the name of peace, saying yes when we mean no, smiling when we want to cry, staying when every part of our body screams to leave. These moments feel small, polite even, but they are not harmless. They are acts of self-abandonment. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir once wrote, "When one gives up their freedom, they cease to exist." And for many women, the cost of being liked, chosen or needed is the erosion of their own voice. Over time, this turns into a kind of spiritual anemia, a soul that has learned to survive by shrinking. But here's the radical truth. You do not owe anyone your silence to make them comfortable. You do not owe anyone your softness to keep the peace. You were not born to twist yourself into a shape that makes others feel safe. You were born to embody the full force of your truth, especially when it rattles the room. Many women are taught that their value lies in how much they can carry. The unspoken belief is, if you can handle it, you should. So they become the fixers, the emotional anchors, the ones who just know what others need. They are praised for their strength, but inside they are exhausted, and often deeply resentful. This is called emotional overfunctioning, where one person takes on the emotional labor of the relationship, while the other coasts. It's the woman who apologizes first, even when she's not wrong, the one who anticipates needs before they're voiced, the one who swallows her needs because he's already stressed enough. But the problem isn't just him, it's the dynamic. It's a dance both people are doing, and unless she steps out of that role, not with blame but with boundaries, the pattern continues. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is let the other person feel the consequences of their own behavior, to stop rescuing, to stop performing, to sit in the discomfort of not fixing it, and watch who steps up when she steps back. Disillusionment has a bad reputation. We talk about it like a crisis, the shattering of innocence, the collapse of dreams. But in philosophy, disillusionment is not a tragedy, it's a rite of passage. To become disillusioned means to see clearly, to lose the illusion you once clung to, so that something real can take its place. The illusion that love should be easy, that goodness guarantees fairness, that your worth is tied to how others see you. When these illusions break, it hurts deeply. But that pain is not a punishment, it's a passage, because now you are no longer trying to fit into a world that doesn't recognize you. Now you are building a world where your truth is not an inconvenience, it's the foundation. This is the quiet freedom disillusionment brings, not happiness, not certainty, but clarity. And from clarity comes power. There's a moment in every journey when words fail, when all the theories, all the philosophies, all the journaling and reflection and podcasts fall silent, and in that silence something else begins to speak. Not the voice of your ego, not the voice of your fear, but the voice of your knowing. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply waits for you to stop running long enough to hear it. This is the sacred pause, the space between the old self and the new one, between the story that kept you safe and the one that sets you free. Most people skip this part, they numb it, distract from it, rush to the next goal, the next high, the next answer. But if you stay, if you can be still in that space, you will feel something ancient waking up inside of you, a remembrance, a whisper, a truth that says, you are not what you've survived, you are not what you've been told, you are not your pain, you are the one who endured it, and that is who you are returning to. There is a solitude that wounds, and a solitude that heals. The first is born from abandonment, from being overlooked, misunderstood, or left behind. It feels cold, hollow, like the world forgot your name. But the second is sacred. It is the solitude that comes when you finally choose yourself, when you stop chasing belonging in places that require your betrayal, when you realize being alone is not the same as being lonely. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone, because when we're alone, truly alone, there are no distractions, just the raw, honest mirror of our own mind." our own heart, our own unresolved questions, and for many that silence is terrifying. But for the few who dare to stay, who learn to sit with their discomfort instead of outsourcing it, something extraordinary happens. They begin to hear the sound of their own soul again. Spiritual maturity is not about perfection. It's not about becoming untouchable, or always calm, or endlessly forgiving. It's about recognition, recognizing the moments when you're slipping back into old patterns, and choosing not to. Recognizing when love becomes manipulation, masked in kindness, when peace becomes repression disguised as control, when your healing is actually avoidance dressed up in positivity. True maturity is brutal in its honesty. It forces you to see the parts of yourself that are still negotiating for scraps, still performing for approval, still hoping someone else will save you. And then it asks you to let the fantasy die. The fantasy that one day, they'll finally see your worth, that if you just become enough, you'll finally be chosen, that your pain will make sense, if you can just make it pretty. Letting those illusions die is not giving up, it's waking up. And what rises from their ashes is not bitterness, it's discernment, and discernment is freedom. Reclamation doesn't always look like a battle. Sometimes it looks like closing the door, turning off your phone, saying, "No, I don't want to explain myself this time." It's in the quiet decisions, the shift in posture, the refusal to beg for clarity from someone committed to confusion. It's the choice to stop auditioning for roles you never agreed to play. This is not the loud cinematic kind of power. It's the kind that grows in silence, that steadies your breath, that doesn't need permission to exist. Because the truth is, you've always been powerful. You just learned to dim it for the comfort of others. And now, you're done doing that. One day, you'll look in the mirror and see her. Not the version of you shaped by their expectations, not the mask you wore to feel safe, not the exhausted girl trying to hold it all together, but her, the woman who stopped apologizing for being complex, who laughs louder now, who trusts the timing of her no's just as much as her yes, who doesn't need to be understood to be at peace. She doesn't perform anymore, she doesn't explain anymore, she doesn't shrink anymore. She simply exists, in the fullness of who she is, not because the world told her she could, but because she decided she would. That mirror won't lie to you. It'll reflect the woman you fought to become, the one who didn't just survive, but remembered herself in the process. Let's end with this truth. You were never broken. You were responding, adapting, surviving in the only ways you knew how. You became what your environment demanded of you. But survival isn't the same as living. And now, you're not just surviving. You're choosing, creating, becoming. You're not here to be palatable. You're not here to make others comfortable. You're here to become someone your younger self never dreamed was possible. And that journey starts with a whisper, a quiet voice inside you saying, "Come home," not to the roles they gave you, not to the masks you wore, not to the expectations you swallowed, but home, to the woman you were before the world told you who to be. She's still there, she's waiting, and she's ready.